Public comments that were pre-recorded will be played at the appropriate time. Additionally, in-person comments may also be heard. Please be advised that this was the last opportunity for pre-recorded comments, and all public participation beginning on September 22nd, 2020 will be in person. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Ms. McDougall?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Present.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Present.
And Mrs. Campbell?
Present.
At this time, the board will hold a silent moment of reflection and invite you to join us. Thank you. Please stand with us and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to offer my fellow board members and Dr. Mullins the opportunity to recognize students, staff, or members of the community. Who would like to start us off this evening? Mr. Susan.
I'm good.
I don't believe it.
Thank you, sir.
I just don't believe it.
Ms. Deskovich,
That was amazing.
right?
And a first. First in 4 years.
I knew there was something coming.
Because he has 3 discussion points. I just want to give a shout out to Sabrina Wolpert, kindergarten teacher at Indialentic Elementary School. I stopped by there last week. Was last week the first week of kindergarten? My days are
Yes.
running together.
I think so.
I hit her classroom on the very first day of kindergarten, and she is the e-learning teacher for kindergarten, which I thought might be a disaster, and it was not. So it was, she's amazing. She happened to be my son, who's in 7th grade now, kindergarten teacher, so I already knew she was an amazing teacher, but I wondered how that was going to work for e-learning. So I popped in, and she had all of her students create, come up the week before at separate times and pick up a science fair board, and had them all create a backdrop for their Zoom classes. And she had pockets, 6 pockets for all the subjects. And so everything that they needed, manipulatives for math and different things. And so when it was time for school, the kids would get in front of their computer screens, open their backdrops. So all the kids had matching backdrops with all their, everything that they needed. And she could say, turn around, pull out from square A what you need, let's put it back. So everything stayed organized and together. And she was just ecstatic with everything. She said that they had pet sharing time where all the kids would bring their pets in front of the screen and introduce them to the class. And so show and tell takes on a whole new meaning for kindergartners right now with Zoom. And she said it was going really well and was enjoying it, at least on day 1. I haven't followed up. I don't know if it's continuing to be such fun for her. But she's a great example of how this can be successful in such challenging times. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Ms. Deskovich. Ms. Campbell, you want to go?
Sure. Last week, I presented the impact pin to Carolyn Robb, who is one of the art teachers at Melbourne High School. I got a glowing email from one of our tech integrators for the district who had been working with them, and she is one of the teachers who, like I said, she's not a tech teacher, she's an art teacher, but she took it upon herself to help with the transition, the integration of Focus and Google Classroom, and she helped the district staff with, what does it really look like, kind of offered herself as a guinea pig, I guess, but then also offered herself to her teammates and colleagues as well to help them get things going. So I just wanted to thank Ms. Robb for her great work in that. And also, just wanted to say to all of our teachers who are doing a hybrid, whether you're elementary or, obviously all of our secondary, almost all of our secondary teachers are doing hybrid, but quite a few of our elementary. I just wanted to say thank you. I know that it is so difficult, the challenges that you've been asked to take on, but just thank you. I know we recognize everybody for what they're doing, but just wanted to just tell you I appreciate the job that you're doing. Also, this is kind of more of an announcement than a recognition, but we have so many things on our end of the board meeting. I thought I'd do this. Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization, which does all the new projects, they are doing a Minton Road study. And so it's kind of a recognition because as part of that, we have the Minton Road schools, or the Wingate schools, the Meadow Lanes and Central, and also West Melbourne School for Science are all in that corridor. And they're doing a study right now, and they're asking for community input. And so you can go to mintonroadstudy.com and took a look at all the plans. They're really taking into consideration bikers and pedestrians and our school traffic and our kids who are getting to school in the morning either on foot or on bicycle. And so it's a great opportunity for you to go take a look if you use or live near or go to school near that road on Minton Road between Palm Bay Road and 192. There's some really creative options, and the public can vote through September the 14th. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Ms. McDougall?
I have a couple. So first, I was lucky enough today to go to Anderson and present a couple pins. I did an impact pin to one of our teachers, Miss Kristen Enos, and I got this very nice long email, and I think Mr. Susan also got it, about a teacher who went out of her way for students who became ill and what she did to make them feel part of. And she just went above and beyond. So I gave her an impact pin because the note that was written from the parents and the students was just pretty amazing. So thank you, Ms. Enos. Also, two more teachers at Anderson, Ms. Lamb and Ms. Pritchard. Again, they're doing e-learning, which is challenging sometimes. And this was a wonderful note from a parent a grandmother who said her kids are just loving it and doing very well, and it's working just fine. So hats off to those three teachers, and they got excellent achiever pins. Now, I have a rather long list of people that I gave pins to a couple weeks ago, and this was at our distribution service team members, these are our people who order supplies, get them in, and right now all the PPE is stacked up to the ceiling. You should go see it. It's amazing. So I went down there, and these are people who get the stuff in, then they sort it out, then they load it back up on trucks, and it's not an air-conditioned site, just so you know this. And I want to give them a shout-out because they do a terrific job, and I don't think people realize how hard they work and how much and what they're dedicated in doing to make sure all of our students and our staff get the safety equipment that they need. So please bear with me. So I want to give a shout-out to Sandy Kimple, Sean Hayes, Sean and Tony McNair were just recently promoted. So I want to give a shout out to both of them for going above and beyond. These are all people who made an impact to all of our schools. Bill Bender, Andrew Deere, Billy Rouse, Brandon Collier, Chris Jackson, Gene Collins, and Robert McGrath. I hope I said his name right. And these are all of our courier drivers who are dropping off everything throughout our 84 schools and other sites. And then two more, Jeff Williams, who's our shipping receiving clerk. Thank you so much. And then last but not least is Christine Rodriguez, the team director who keeps everybody together and on task. So thank you very much for all you're doing for all of our schools. And we couldn't get there without you, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Dr. Mullins?
Thank you, Ms. Belford. I just want to acknowledge I had a chance to get out on Tuesday and visit some schools, and principals graciously took me to some classrooms. I too visited Miss Wolpert's class at Indiana Elementary School. Ms. Deskovich gave me the heads up. She said, you got to go by and meet her. So I got to tell you, 2 weeks later with kindergarten, she was still as enthusiastic as it sounds like she was with you, and just so excited I caught her just before she was getting online with her kids, and just a delightful lady, and doing a wonderful job working through a very different platform as a veteran teacher. Then I met at Indy Atlantic a second grade e-learning teacher, Miss Nisha Worthington, who too, she shared the struggles and challenges and apprehensions and probably even some tears early on and trying to figure out how to do e-learning. And Tuesday she was had just clear command of the process and her learning environment and had really established a routine with her kids. It was so impressive. And then I got over to Melbourne High School and visited with Miss Julie Miner, a ESC self-contained teacher. And it doesn't take long, but a few seconds to walk into a classroom and feel a culture and an environment and the love and embracement of her kids. And she was managing both kids in her classroom and online, and she was sitting at her desk getting one of her students oriented to the day even before the school day started. And but just a real gracious lady, and appreciate her great work to incorporate and integrate both e-learning and in-person students. And then I met a young man, a first-year teacher, a freshman English teacher, Mr. Jonathan Halfide at Mel High. And first-year teaching is always a challenging experience, but I said, you're in good company, because quite frankly, we're all kind of first-year educators this year because it's such a different environment. And again, just another demonstration of a positive outlook and a can-do attitude. And it was obvious that both school environments had really done such an amazing job of supporting their teachers. I asked every teacher, what more can we do to support you? And they said, you know, our administration has been great. So I had a wonderful visit, and just wanted to say a special thank you, like Ms. Campbell, for our teachers and taking on the additional responsibilities and the challenges and overcoming them, and finding ways to give our kids the positive experience they deserve and they want to give them.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple from me. Like all of you, I think we just cannot thank our teams enough. I've gotten so much positive feedback from parents and students, and many of our teachers just really rising to the occasion through the challenges and figuring out how to work their way through all of those things. And I think we also have to give our principals some kudos, because we know, that oftentimes leadership is what makes the difference between teachers really being able to feel successful and being supported through those challenges. So thanks to all of our school teams who are just doing a phenomenal job, getting very, very few concerns from parents or students about their experience. So I think that speaks volumes. Also wanted to give a quick shout out to Titusville High School, who was recognized in U.S. News for the badge of best high schools. Titusville High School, West Shore, and Bayside actually were all highlighted. Several of our schools ranked pretty high in the rankings, but I think Bayside and Titusville sometimes don't fall into those great recognition opportunities because they serve different students, and that was one of the elements of their recognition, was the fact that they do serve a lot of diverse students and close those achievement gaps. So kudos to all of them. And I believe that will bring us to the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Mullins.
Ms. Belford and members of the board, on this evening's agenda, we have 11 consent items, 12 action items, which include the final budget hearing items. Additionally, we have board discussion items, and I will be providing a superintendent's report. Changes made it to the agenda since it was first released to the public are as follows. There are no administrative staff recommendations this evening, so the placeholder was removed. Attachments were added to item G19 on the superintendent's presentation, final public budget hearing, and item G24 on adopt the 2020-21 budget. Items G29 on procurement solicitations and G30 on department school initiated agreements received revisions. That's it.
All right. What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Deskovich, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Is there any discussion? All right, please vote. No, I just had to log back in. I'm almost there. All right, and the motion passes 5-0.
Did you vote?
Oh, 4-0, sorry. I saw 4 and thought it was mine not showing yet. Is it hanging up for you? Okay. And the motion passes 5-0. All right. That brings us to presentations. Dr. Mullins.
Well, good evening again, members of the board, and for our in-person audience as well as those joining with us by TV. Wanted to give the board and our community an update on several of the items that have been discussed over the last few weeks related to school opening and the supports that we're providing both our schools and our students and staff. First, I'll start with an enrollment update. We came to the board approximately a little over 2 weeks ago, actually the day after the first day of school, and reported enrollment numbers at that time. There's been a considerable change and improvement, if you will, in our enrollment numbers since we were together 2.5 weeks ago. If you look at this chart, let's see, is it? Okay. If you look at this chart in the first column, we have our elementary projection of 34,064 students. As of yesterday, our elementary enrollment is at 31,703 students. As I talk to our elementary leaders, we essentially are seeing enrollment grow every day, at least by a few students. So likely it has changed again since these numbers were reported yesterday. You'll note that we've broken down at this time what our e-learning participation is, both for elementary and secondary, as well as identified the Brevard virtual enrollment. And you'll see in the far right, Brevard Virtual School, that's full-time student enrollment is at 1,415 students, which is up a little over 1,200 students from this time a year ago. We had just under 200 full-time enrolled BVS students last year. In addition, our secondary schools, 32,075 students projected for enrollment this school year. We are falling short in that enrollment as well, like elementary, with 31,473 for a total enrollment below our projection of 2,963 students. Keep in mind that that does not include the Brevard Virtual School students who transitioned over. We have counted them in our projections, although admittedly we do not receive full FTE for students in Brevard Virtual School, but we do receive a vast majority of the FTE that is earned for those students. Also within the 2,963 students would be reflected in a considerable increase in the number of students, families who have selected homeschool education, as that is increased from last year by approximately 1,586 students. So when you take into consideration the homeschool students who we have verified and validated, we have less than 1,500 students below our original projection that we sent to the state last January. I want to commend our school leaders as they continue to work valiantly to reach out to families and students and identify and determine what their intentions are for this school year. And I would remind our viewing public that the state of Florida has mandatory school attendance for students age 5 to 16. And if you are choosing to select the home school education option, parents are required to submit a letter of intent to the district so that we know where those students are, and we're happy to work with them through that. But our schools are continuing to support our families as they make decisions moving forward. Something that is not yet updated in this is we keep in mind that other districts, particularly out of state, didn't start their school year until this week. So we don't know of students who transition out or move away from Brevard, whether in-state or out of state, until we receive the request for school records from their new school. So we're continuing to receive those, and we're updating these numbers as we go. I would like to share with the board as well that we are evaluating and monitoring our school bus ridership. Based on our ridership in February at the time of FTE last year compared to this year, we are at about a 41% utilization or 41% participation in ridership compared to the ridership in February. So that is obviously considerably lower. The good news is that is certainly assisting with social distancing for our students while they're on our buses, but it obviously presents some concerns related to funding that would come with our ridership, because it is also enrollment or participation based for funding. So we're watching that very closely. Next, I'd like to provide the board an update on the status of our health tech staffing in our schools. Currently, we have 17 vacancies across those positions in schools. However, it only represents 12 schools because several of our schools actually receive 2 allocations for health tech staffing or a nurse in some cases. So starting tomorrow, we'll have 6 of those positions filled, one starting on September 18th, one that is already hired and awaiting a start date. So by the end of next week, we will have 90% of the positions filled across our schools and staffed by a medical professional. We did just receive some good news just before the board meeting in our conversations with Stewart Medical, as we've been working with them to identify potential health professionals for these positions. They have identified 3 positions, highly qualified, actually I believe retiree staff members who have already made connection with the Department of Health and are in the process of onboarding. So we'll be able to fill those, fill 3 more positions with those staff. Nevertheless, our schools have received allocation and will continue to receive allocated funding to hire a substitute to serve in the clinic. And many of our schools have taken advantage of that, and in some cases, those substitutes actually held medical professional credentials and brought that experience and credential with them to support our schools in the clinics. But in any case, a substitute can at least alleviate the strain that is put on staff in the school so that folks can stay focused on supporting our families and our staff in our schools while meeting the needs throughout the clinics. And a substitute, as well as our staff, are trained by the Department of Health to understand what the protocols, the requirements are for working in the clinic. A quick update, I've shared with the board previously that we're in the process of, I'll say at this point, receiving the CARES Act funds from the county. We made application to the county across the street, and they just validated that the allocation to increase our health tech professionals from a 29.5-hour work week to a 40-hour work week was approved and has qualified for funding. We're in the process of working through the invoicing process because they can only provide the funds as a reimbursement, not pay ahead. So we've got to work through our accounting department and their funding, their budget office, to make sure that we have all of that funding appropriately aligned. But we're excited that we'll be able to move in that direction in the coming days. The other actions that we are taking is our procurement department has analyzed our current temporary staffing contracts that we have currently for positions like custodians, food and nutrition services, support staff as well. And we've determined that we can add the classification of a health tech professional to that contract for temporary staffing, in hopes that those agencies would be able to provide individuals with the appropriate credentials to fill our clinics in moments of vacancy. So we'll be bringing to the board an amendment to those contracts at the next board meeting, which will then put us in a position to take advantage of that opportunity if it avails. Next, our computer recovery update or process. Again, we distributed approximately 15,000 computers to students and staff over since the close of last school year. We continue to work to retrieve those devices, and we've recovered 13,537, but we fully expect that that number is underrepresented because for the last 2.5 weeks, our schools have been receiving devices as our kids return to school, and our health techs have had no shortage of things to do over the last 2.5 weeks. So they have been receiving the devices, they have been logging them on their records at the school, but they've not updated that in our online registration system, and that'll be happening by the end of this month, so we'll be able to provide updated numbers. I want to emphasize that there was some misrepresentation of that process. We have clearly identified, we have registered every one of those devices to an individual and know who has returned them and who has not. And we're continuing to follow up with individuals who have not returned the device and make arrangements to have that device returned. In addition, I don't think it was shared that our technology team actually, and I don't understand how this works, but they do, a device or a program was installed on those devices to be distributed that actually turned off internet capability at a designated time over the summer. So those machines don't have internet capability right now, which really decentivizes keeping them and not returning them to the school, and that has also helped in our process to get them retrieved. Finally, I'd like to provide the board and the community an update on our pursuits to further provide transparency with our families and our community as we manage the reality of COVID cases and individuals who need to be quarantined who happen to be a contact to a case who may have COVID. We want to clarify that quarantine decisions are not made by BPS solely. We work in cooperation virtually every day with the Department of Health, and we make those decisions in cooperation with them. We have a very thorough flowchart process that determines the process by which we follow to either quarantine a class or close a class, or in a recent situation, we did quarantine Gulfview Elementary School as a precaution. Principals, I just have to give a shout out to our administrators across the district. This is one additional responsibility on top of so many others, and they have done an absolutely admirable job of becoming familiar with the protocols, the flow charts, communication with our district leaders as they work to support our principals, and then communicating to their staff, their families, and keeping everyone apprised of the process and notifications with letters. So I want to share that we are preparing to launch tomorrow a new data dashboard that will be updated twice a week. And what you see here is a screenshot of the BPS COVID-19 dashboard that'll be updated every Tuesday and every Friday for the preceding days since the last update. So for example, you see here, this is the data dashboard numbers for the time period of August 31st through September 3rd. This will be updated for the time period of September 4th, which was last Friday, through Tuesday of this week, or today, September 10th. Then on, no.
No, it's not right.
Today's Thursday.
I was thinking
Thursday.
today was Tuesday. Normally we're doing this on a Tuesday. See, I got myself confused. So September 4th through Tuesday, which was September 8th. And then our Friday update will be the time period from September 8th through September today, the 10th. So obviously it'll be clearly identified on the dashboard because it's important to us that we make sure everyone understands what the reporting period is. Each of these dashboard reporting periods will be archived on the dashboard website so our community can go back and look at what each update is. It identifies both the number of reported positive cases district-wide by employee and students. You can see during this time period, we had 28 reported positive cases, 6 employees and 22 students, as well as the number of quarantines from a contact to a case district-wide, or 284 total, with 232 coming from contacts to a case in a school or a work environment, and 52 quarantines that came as a result of a contact to a case outside of the school or in the community or in the household. Also in the data dashboard, in every report, we will list the schools impacted by a reported positive case, as well as those with reported quarantines. You'll see here this link will provide quarantine numbers by school. At the bottom, you'll see that we'll provide an updated graphic in each update of what the impact is across Brevard County compared to the 79,353 students and staff that we have as part of Brevard Public Schools. I would emphasize that this will be the most accurate updated numbers for Brevard Public Schools. When entities request a public records request, it takes some time to provide those records, so we would suggest that if other numbers are reported, they may not be aligned with these because they'll be lagged and not necessarily based on the same time period that we would have been providing this update. So I would encourage our community to use this as a consistent and valid source of information as we move forward. And that is all I have this evening for our update, but I'm happy to answer questions for the board if you have any at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. Any board members have any questions for Dr. Mullins on this presentation? Ms. Deskovich?
I don't have a question, but can you have someone send us that presentation?
Yes, we'll have it sent to you tomorrow.
Any questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Mullins.
You're welcome, thank you.
We are now at public comments. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. We have a clock in front of me to help you keep track of your time. When your time is over, you'll be asked to stop and allow the next speaker his or her turn. Always keep in mind that reasonable decorum is expected at all times, and your statements should be directed to the board chairman. The chairman may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when time is up, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. Should an individual not observe proper etiquette, the chairman may request the individual leave the meeting. Let's all encourage an environment appropriate for our children who may be present or are watching from home. We have 2 speakers in person this evening, James Paddock and Joanne Lyle, and then we have recorded public comment as well. So, Mr. Paddock, if you would like to step to the microphone in front of me, please, sir. Give me just 1 second before
am I
you
clear?
start.
Just 1 second.
1 second. I have a technical issue with our timer. Mr. Francisco, I appear to have no power on the timer. All right, we're going to go old-fashioned, so I'm going to set my timer on my phone, and when we get to 30 seconds, I'll give you a little wave. Does that work?
Is this working?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second. Let me get to my timer because I don't want to mess anyone up here. All right, whenever you're ready, sir.
Okay, I'm addressing you on behalf of my son, well, on behalf of my wife and myself, because of something that's going on inside of, what I perceive is going on inside of Vieira High School that's wrong. My wife was checking my son's, he's a junior in the high school, he's in the civics honors class, and she was checking his homework and came across 3 questions in his homework assignment. They started in the order of, do you feel safe or safer? Do you have guns in your house? Do you own guns? And how do you feel about the victims of school shootings? Do you think school shootings are a problem? Needless to say, we wanted to find out where this was coming from, and he was subjected to watching video with his class on school shootings, where students, I guess they were survivors of school shootings, were interviewed, and some NRA members were interviewed. It's kind of noteworthy, in my opinion, that the very next day after this, there was a active shooter drill in the school. So I think you have to pay attention to the sequence of events. He's forced to watch a video about with kids who'd survived school shootings. He's asked if there's guns in our house and if he feels safe. And the next day, he has to go through an active shooter practice in school. There's certainly an implication that you're creating the thought that guns in the house could be brought into the school for school shootings. Anybody who's the slightest bit objective is going to think that that's an issue. I don't think the teacher has any business asking any questions about whether or not somebody has weapons in their home. It's not her business. It's a completely inappropriate question. There's a lot of talk about indoctrination, so I started going through his notebook beyond that. There are other questions that go into similar areas. He's asked questions about promises Donald Trump has made and promises he's kept. What did he call Joe Biden? The answer from that, this is from another video. These are all YouTube videos where he's called the destroyer. There's a third one where he's asked to give the definition of gerrymandering, which for those who don't know, it's the redistricting of congressional districts. Then it asks how many seats the Republicans gained from gerrymandering. If I wanted my son to be indoctrinated into a particular political mindset, my wife and I would do it ourselves. This does not belong in the classroom. This is not part of civics and U.S. government. He shouldn't be asked questions about weapons in our home or any of these things. This teacher is acting, in my opinion, completely inappropriate and it's intrusive. I'm bringing it to your attention. I brought it to the school's attention. The vice principal, Mr. Link, told me he would get back to me. Instead, he had the teacher call me. She defended what she did. She said, I have the leeway to bring anything into the classroom that I think is important and relevant if it's a current event. Anything she wants to bring in. And she was offended that I even contacted the school. So I find this problematic. She actually pretty simply told me she's going to continue doing what she wants and that we have no say as parents.
Thank you for joining us this evening, Mr. Paddock. Dr. Sullivan is in the back of the room. She just raised her hand for you. If you could just please touch base with her, and she will address your concerns. Our last in-person speaker this evening is Joanne Lyle. Joanne, if you would please make your way to the mic in the front of the room. And I'll do the same for you. When you're at about 30 seconds, I'll hold up a 3 for you, and then when you're done, I'll go ahead and let you know, okay?
That's a little tall. Hi, I'd like to introduce myself as Joanne Lyle. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here mainly to try to understand why we're seeking a name change for a school mascot. As I said, I've been a longtime community member of Merritt Island, and it's been very difficult to hear this when the only knowledge of it came across social media, and that the community wasn't told beforehand, before any decisions were being made or anything like that. I want to just read to you what I have here. I would like to think that something of this nature would have required some input, not only from the school improvement, but also from the community at large. The knowledge of this being done was put on social media, leading our community to believe it was already done and just waiting for board approval. I know I speak for many hoping that this is not the case. I was given the information that the Native American Indian tribe that frequented Edgewood with their history of their people and their settling here on Merritt Island were contacted and that they were fine with the name that has been there for many, many years. Again, this was secondhand knowledge. I can't say that I know that. I myself tried to contact the Ayase tribe. I used to keep pretty good contact with them at times. They were in Cocoa Village, but I was also told that because of their age and because of COVID, that they no longer have that building there. This same Ayes tribe not only shared the culture with Edgewood and their students for many, many years, but they also shared how at one time they sold the property to the schools and were part of laying the bricks of the actual school itself. They shared on how many historical events and gatherings that were shared. They shared this with not only the Edgewood community, but the Edgewood students on the premises, and we're very proud of what they had done and that we would remember them with their legacy for years to come. The school was named in honor of this Indian Ayes tribe, not to offend anyone. The Indian River was named in honor of the many tribes that were here, not to offend them. I have to ask why we are so aggressively trying to take the culture and the history of something that was made so wonderful and make it something to fit a narrative of time when everyone is trying to find hate and disrespect just for using a title. I know that the Seminole Indians used their tribe name for their college. When they were asked and approached, they wanted it changed. They said no, and they honored that. I would hope that our community would do the same. I feel our community was faced with Edgewood changing from middle school to a school of choice with conflict, and great conflict. It divided the community on Merritt Island for a long time, and it still has a source of tension in some areas. At that time, the county should have closed Edgewood maybe, like they did West Shore, and made school changes at that time, such as improvements, changing of names, whatever needed to be done.
Thank you,
And
Ms.
it would've been-
Lyle. Your 3 minutes is up, but thank you for joining us this evening. And I know we have a couple of other recorded comments regarding Edgewood, so we'll address that when we finish the rest of them,
I
okay?
appreciate that. Thank you so much for your
Thanks for being here. Mr. Francisco, if you could please load our recorded comments for us this evening. Thank you, sir.
Everyone, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Facility Services for Brevard Public Schools. And in consideration of the current during the COVID-19 emergency, guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as Executive Order 20-91 issued by Governor DeSantis, it has been necessary to modify our procedures for public comment. Tonight, we are recording comments for the public comment section of the agenda first, and then for the public hearing on the tentative budget that is later on tomorrow's school board agenda. We have 8 registered to speak under public comments and 1 registered to speak under the public hearing on the tentative budget. Comments for both sections recorded, and we will play them back under the public comment section or the tentative budget hearing section of the board meeting tomorrow as applicable. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Our moderator will keep track of your time and ask you to conclude your comments when you have reached 3 minutes. Always keep in mind that reasonable decorum is at all times. Please keep your comments appropriate for our children who may be watching or listening from home. Before speaking, please state your name, the organization you represent if applicable. We won't be answering questions on tonight's call, but our staff will follow up with you if you have a question or need a response. Thank you. Ben, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sue. And with that, for everybody that's on the call, go ahead and press 0 now. We'll get you in line with Donna to verify your name and get you in to make your comments. Go ahead and press 0 now to get in line. And we're going to go ahead and start the call with Anthony. Anthony, go ahead with your comment. I'll go ahead first and last name and your address and your comment.
My name is Anthony Clucci. I'm the president of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. Friday evening, we concluded the vote on our memorandum of agreement surrounding COVID-19. I'm pleased to report that 95% of those that voted cast a yes vote. There were 1,964 yes votes, 114 no votes, and 37 abstained from the vote. The results of this vote mean our employees are trusting that this agreement will be carried out with fidelity. It is important to realize that some teachers made the decision to continue to work because of the protections provided in this agreement. Some of those teachers are high risk or have a high risk individual living in. As this agreement potentially deals with life and death issues, it must be honored without question. It is important that we do everything we can to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. A big part of that is being transparent about what is happening in the district. With that said, I appreciate that you honored my reporting to all parents and staff whenever there is a positive COVID-19 case at the school. I do need something else from you right now. As many of our teachers are struggling to adjust to many new challenges, such as safety protocols, block scheduling, e-learning, and hybrid instruction, I need you to reassure them that their best is good enough. And their best instruction this year may not be as good as their best instruction was last year. But that's okay, because this year is something brand new. It seems that because of the reckless rush to get back to normal, stemming from our lack of leadership from our governor, there is pressure to pretend like our students and teachers should be performing as they always have. We must not succumb to this pressure. I'm calling on you to change the climate of this district. Teachers, parents, and students must understand that safety is the most important priority now. They must understand that this year is going to be messy, confusing, and difficult. But that is only temporary, and together we can get through this. Because without that attitude being pervasive throughout this district, this year will only be more messy, confusing, and difficult. Every teacher, parent, and staff member should rest easy every night knowing that their school board has their back if they did their best each day. Really, that is the standard right now. It is a standard I will use to advocate for teachers, staff, and students. We must take care of our community, and you must lead on this issue. Don't forget to practice social distancing, wear a mask, and wash your hands. Thank you.
Vanessa Skipper, Brevard Federation of Teachers. Recently, I learned that we do not actually have nurses in our school. We have what we know as medical technicians who hold a high school diploma and have some training from the Department of Health. It is because of this that it was believed that we could train our school staff to act as nurses if they were not there, or act as med techs if they were not there. First of all, we should not be adding to the place of our highly overworked school staff. For example, we had an issue this week where a teacher sent a student who was dry heaving and pale in the face to the front to the nurse who was not there, or the med tech that didn't have one, and so whoever was in charge sent that student, sick as he was, back to class. This is a problem. We must not ignore the systemic problems that plague our public education, especially not during a pandemic. And we must make sure that we have medical professionals in our schools. In addition, I would like to highlight some of the issues that our teachers are facing with hybrid instruction. We need to get our numbers up and avoid potential layoffs and avoid potential money pitfalls. We had to go to hybrid instruction. But here is what some of our teachers have to say about this. One of my biggest issues is that students are completing work on my Google Classroom but are not showing. Our students are switching back and forth between the two modes. They will show up one day in person and the next day online. What's even more confusing is I'm supposed to mark them present even if I don't see them, as long as they completed something on Google Classroom that day, even though they are getting most of the assignments wrong because they're not there for instruction. Most of my e-learners show up, follow the instruction time, and complete work as well. However, having full brick-and-mortar classes without the equipment in the classroom is very challenging, even though they receive the same activity on paper. Also, the technology in school is not cooperative and slows down the whole process. I don't even know where to start on how awful this whole plan is. In-person learners are frustrated with teachers because we have to be on computer instructing e-learners. Then the whole planning process in science. I have to search for a YouTube lab and rewrite all the directions for e-learners. I have in-person learners trying to complete a lab while their teacher is teaching e-learners. What about parents telling us they have issues with Zoom? I'm not a tech specialist, and how can I help you fix your computer? So much more, just too tired now to type out all the issues. At the high school level, it has been a big mistake. Even though students were given clear directions and expectations, they are not following them. I spend more time on e-learners than I do for the students in my classroom. No one, not students, teachers, or parents. Parents email and call in frustration because they can't log on. Teacher is pulling her hair out because she can't be everywhere at once. Parents sit next to students and feed them answers. iReady Diagnostic is going to be skewed because it's testing what parents know, not. I could go on and on. I maybe read about 5 of 100 comments we've received in 24 hours on a post that we made. Hybrid instruction is obviously what was necessary to get students to enroll, but it is not sustainable. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Kathy West. I wanted to speak on comparable work climate and compare comparable pay. Be receiving pay increases when teachers and other staff members are getting pay increases, and this is not happening. 50 cents per hour to go to certain schools isn't a pay increase. That's a supplement incentive. The pay is insufficient, and I'm not the only one that felt that it's insufficient. Mr. Paul and Mr. Watts also elaborated on this on last week. Pittsburgh just gave their subs from a $100. They went from a $100 a day to $250 per day. That just blows me off, because that's a lot of pay increase compared to our county, and our county's pay is 19% below the national average. This concludes my.
Good evening. I'm Jonathan Hilliard, Second Vice President of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. I want to address the issue of the hybrid class. The Brevard Federation of Teachers took the proactive position of sending out a survey to its teachers to find out what is happening in the classroom. The survey was sent out yesterday, and immediately we received over 630 responses. Here's the summary of those responses. 54% elementary school teachers, 45% were secondary teachers. In answer to the question of how would you rate the effectiveness of hybrid instruction so far, 0% of the elementary school teachers said highly effective, 1% of the secondary school. 23% effective, 19% for the secondary school teachers. 45% of the elementary school teachers said it was ineffective, 52% for secondary. 30% of the elementary school teachers said it was highly ineffective, 26% for the secondary teachers. In answer to the question, when asked about the guidelines and expectations provided for hybrid instruction, 0% of the elementary school teachers said it was very clear, 1% of the secondary schools. 14% elementary school teachers stated that the guidelines and expectations were just clear, 22% of the secondary teachers. 50% of the elementary school teachers stated that they were not clear. Guidelines and expectations were not clear. 60% for the secondary schools. 35% of the elementary school teachers said there were no guidelines or expectations provided at all. 15% of the secondary school teachers. When asked how could the district provide guidelines and expectations, elementary school teachers, 24% said through documentation, through a document, 33% for secondary teachers. 21% of the elementary school teachers said through video, 20% for secondary teachers. 22% of the elementary school teachers said through a sample lesson plan, 20% for secondary teachers. 32% of the elementary school teachers said they would like to see professional development, 26% for the secondary teachers. When asked, do your e-learning students have the necessary equipment for you to see and hear them, 57% of the elementary teachers said yes. 32% of the secondary teachers said yes. 42% of the elementary school teachers said, no, they do not, my students do not have the necessary equipment to see or hear me. 67% of the secondary teachers who responded said their students do not have the necessary equipment to see or hear them. Our principals and teachers are professionals and are willing to work in a very challenging conditions of COVID. Please do not leave them high and dry with excuses. Give them the necessary tools and training to win. Thank you very much.
My name is Jennifer Shingleton, and I'm a parent of an Indian Edgewood Indian class of 2020. And I was shocked to learn that there was a mascot review committee that quietly researched the idea of changing the school mascot because members reached out. Then in the first meeting, they unanimously decided to retire some Indian as mascot. This was a hand-picked group, or it most definitely would not have been unanimous. I would be interested to know who was on the committee and who, because the people that I've talked with, including teachers, PTO board members, and SGA board members, knew nothing about it until an email went out on August 27th which amazingly happened to coincide with a nice lengthy article in the Merritt Island Now magazine and the Florida Today newspaper that both came out on the same day. Coincidence? I think not. This is a concern for few people that attend Edgewood, and because I'm quite sure that all of you would understand that the urging of numerous community members that have supposedly have been emailing and calling on this issue have lots more important issues to deal with over this crazy summer of pandemics, unemployment, and educational uncertainty. Secret. The mascot discussion has been pushed by several Edgewood parents over the last 6 months, with the exception of a few parents who think that we're racist because we don't agree with them, and that's their words, not mine. Everyone else disagrees. I would think it would be a fair assessment to say that the majority do not want a mascot name change. Secondly, I am a woman with a proud Cherokee heritage. My grandmother was one half Cherokee. My grandfather would always get upset when people started talking about changing the names of the mascots of the Washington Redskins and the Cherokee Indians. He was proud of his Indian Americans, not just once, but over several decades, continually shows that 90% of Native Americans polled are not offended by the use of these mascots. And if we continue to succumb to the, oh, we might offend someone, let's fix it mentality, where does it end? The Dallas Cowboys, the Raiders, the Giants, the Vikings, and myself. Any of this, I mean, anything could offend somebody. I'm also a Texan, and as much as I think this is a joke, there's a talk of changing the Major League Baseball culture because law enforcement is now offensive to some. At some point, things have started spiraling out of control. I mean, who would have ever thought that the name Karen would have become so offensive? It's time for the silent majority to speak up and have a say as well. People have started to become offended just for the sake of being offended. Our district struggles enough with finances, and the last thing we need to be spending money on and all that entails, and it would be expensive. We have multiple sports that are self-pay, and uniforms and equipment aren't cheap, and we try to use them for multiple years. Changing the names means that families would once again be asked to come up with additional funds to replace perfectly good gear. Take of the COVID era, families are already struggling, which straddle them with the additional expenses to appease. In closing, I would ask that this name change not take place, and at the very least, the school board requires that those things are decided in a more open, democratic way. The school doesn't belong to a select few, but to all of us that pay taxes. With all the changes that COVID has inflicted on our world, our families, our children, and our schools, a little normalcy is what we needed, not change for the sake of someone's agenda. Go Edgewood Indians. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Adrienne Schmadeke, and I live in Sierra, and I'm a proud parent of 2 students. Edgewood Junior Senior High's mascot, the Indian, was chosen when the school opened over 60 years ago to honor the Ayers Indians and their descendants who helped build the school. The Ayers was a major tribe that dominated East Central coastal Florida from Cape Canaveral Inlet, which is now known as Brevard County, up through the 18th century. They lived along the present-day Indian River and became extinct as individual groups during the 18th century. The Edgewood Indian tradition honors the Ayers heritage of the area in which the school was built. Changing a mascot not only dishonors tradition, but also brings on exorbitant costs to change facility signage, logos, uniforms, and more. Upon speaking with the principal of Edgewood, Declan Ingrata, he explained that to cover the cost. In my opinion, it is reprehensible to ask Edgewood families and the community to donate to the mascot change, as it is something that is not necessary. The cost for changing the high school mascot by other schools ranges from a low of $70,000 to over $300,000. Everything that has an Indian logo or verbiage would need updated, including the gymnasium floor, facility signage, uniforms, scoreboards, and more. $70,000 could buy Edgewood the much-needed facilities improvements and technology upgrades, including covering the walkways to the portables or even building an addition and eliminating portables. Have a new track, more science labs, and more technology. This magnitude should not rest with only the school. The Board of Education, who are elected by the community, should have the final vote on whether to approve. This would help prevent further financial waste and nonsense in the future if a principal decides on his or her own individual persuade the principal to make a mascot change for whatever political reason is popular at the time.
Hello, my name is Maria Swindell. I'm a parent of an Edgewood Junior Senior High School student. My daughter was the 7th grade president and currently the 3rd year girls varsity student athlete. I'm here today to speak against our Edgewood mascot change. My daughter is proud to be an Edgewood Indian and what it represents. I understand what the concerns are and would agree because the name Redskins is a derogatory term. However, our school mascot is the Indian, in which a name of proud indigenous people. Everyone is an immigrant in this country, unless you're an American Indian. They are proud people, and we should take great pride honoring them with their names. I speak of you today from the perspective of a multiracial family. I am Filipino. My children are half Filipino, Irish, and English. Our family have taught our children to never judge or stereotype anyone. When we bleed, we all bleed the same. As an active volunteer parent for our community and school, I was never notified of such meetings or discussion regarding the change of our mascot. We feel this was done in a closed group that didn't include the rest of the families and students of Edgewood. The parent of the students that wrote those letters, by the parent was highly influenced by her. When we were first aware of this topic, it was on Facebook parents page. It had immediately responded to the oppose of the topic and were completely surprised the decisions were made without 90% of the Edgewood students and families being included. I'm really disappointed. It has become a political situation in our school. We have bigger topics to address like COVID, funding for buses. How about speakers for our field for athletic sporting events? Food, supplies for sponsored students, families, and etc. Our school has been around for many decades, and we just got a flagpole this year. Our funds should be utilized where it really matters. We believe that changing the mascot is a waste of time and resources. Thank you for your time, and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you very much, and that's for tonight. I appreciate everyone being here this evening on the call, and we will play the comments tomorrow at tomorrow's board meeting. Thank you. Good night.
All right, thank you to all of this evening's speakers. Do any board members wish to reply to any of the speakers for this evening, or?
Well, we're going to talk about the mascot later, so I will address many of the issues later.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall.
My issue is not to talk about that. So if
Hold,
you wanna
Mr. Susan, can you talk into your mic? Ms. McDougall, your mic was not on.
So later on, when I discuss, my point that I brought was not to discuss anything that they're referring to as far as an Edgewood mascot. So if you want to refer to that, just make it another point. Mine's to refer to renaming of mascots and facilities and stuff in general. So, but didn't want you guys to get confused. I didn't want the conversation to be debated over whether we had ace Indians or anything like that, just about the process. So if we wanted to talk about it, that's great. I just didn't want you to think
That was
point-
what your...
Right, so just add another point to just say, discuss Edgewood at mascot, but that was what it was, so.
Madam Chair, what do you think is best? So,
I don't think it hurts to let the speakers that are here this evening know that, one, it's not currently a board decision to make a determination on the mascot, but I think probably more importantly is that the decision is not final. There are looks like two upcoming opportunities, September 17th and October 15th.
yes.
Where the School Advisory Council at Edgewood is welcoming community input. Is that correct, Ms. McDougall?
That is correct. On the 17th, did anyone, I'm going to ask you all the question, did you receive the communication from the school that you are welcome to speak and that the first SAC meeting, there's going to be at least 40 people, and then the next SAC meeting in October, there's another 40 people. She has laid out a process. This will not be an overnight process. Principal Ingrata has stepped back and has incorporated the SAC committee and input from the community and from students if they would like to speak too. So, like I said, this is not going to be a quick decision, and there will be input from people in the community. But I do want to address, because I knew this was going to come up, I wanted to address cost, because things would eventually change. At this time, they are not discussing changing the colors. They want to keep the colors the same. I asked her, I said, what about uniforms? And she said uniforms replaced every 2 years. And if they decide, the key word is if they decide to change the mascot, that the uniform they have now would just go until it wears out. Why replace something that is already usable? So that would be on the normal recycle if there's going to be a change. The gym floor, a local business, has already volunteered to without any, and nobody asked them, they volunteered to the school and said, we will repaint the image on the gym floor free of charge. Jostens has reached out to help with anything that they need free of charge. So there are a lot of people that without any input from anybody has stepped up and said, if you need to do this, we will help you free of charge. I think the biggest thing that hasn't been decided is the sign out front. I think that would be the one thing that could be a sticking point, I'm not sure. But anyhow, I wanted to share with the board the mascot review process. I believe this is posted. Have you seen the mascot review? I don't know. I will ask Ms. Ingrata if she has posted it anywhere. But it's very detailed. It talks about September 9th and October 7th are community notices. September 17th is the SAC Community Session 1. Then she talks about what the rules, it's pretty much what the rules are here. You have 2 minutes, be appropriate, be respectful. And then it goes to a second meeting on October 15th, which is the Session 2, which 40 more people can speak. Then they have SAC deliberation through October and November. It's a primary voting. And then it goes, well, what happens to this, what happens to that, when, if there is a decision to change. So it's pretty well mapped out. It is a process that is not going to happen overnight. So the school has stepped back and say, let's get more community input, because they have heard you. So I wanted to let you know that you do have the opportunity, and if you don't know how to reach out to make your voice heard, please contact the school, and they will help you get to the site that you need to record your message.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Mr. Susan.
So there's a couple of things that were said in there, and I just wanted some point of clarification. First off, that it's not the school board's decision, final decision, in anything of a name change or a mascot change. Can you clarify where that is in policy, standard, anything like that?
We have a policy for naming schools and facilities, but we don't have a policy requiring the board to approve mascot name.
What I mean is that there's no policy for anybody to actually rename a mascot either. There's no procedure for
Correct.
that either. There's a policy for renaming it or
No.
for naming it.
There's a policy for naming schools and facilities. We do not have a policy regarding mascot.
Right. So in the event, our charging documents as school board members is that in the event that there's no policy or procedure, as long as it does not expressly inhibited by some other rule, the school board has the final say in anything that happens inside the school district. It's our charging document.
And not arguing that point at this point in time, Mr. Susan. I think that's where we're going with discussion later, is what I anticipate based on what you put forward in the email that you sent. My only point was there were a couple of people who made comments that the board should make a decision not to do this. And at this point in time, there is no requirement that it be brought to the board.
Right, and I just wanted it to be stated that there is no process or policy that allows a school to do it to begin with also. That's all. Okay.
Any other board members wish to make any comments on the public comments? Reply to anyone? Dr. Mullins, would you like to weigh in on anything?
Yes, Ms. Belford, I'd like to respond to Ms. Skipper's comments about our health tech staffing across our school district. One, I just want to clarify, I'm surprised that she was surprised to hear we have health techs. We have had health techs staffing our school clinics for at least the last 10 years. That goes at least back to what we're able to verify and likely before that. The suggestion to staff our clinics with a registered nurse comes with a significant cost, more than double than what we pay now for a certified health tech. So I just want to clarify that that was not a decision to staff with health techs was not a decision made recently. That's been a long-standing practice of Brevard Public Schools. But perhaps what's more important is that we do not make medical assessments in our school clinics. We defer to medical professionals to do that. That's why we have law enforcement on our campuses. That's why we utilize 911 when appropriate and so on. That includes our current protocols for making determinations about an individual, whether it's a student or a staff member, who may be either presenting symptoms consistent with COVID-19 or even have indicated that they are experiencing symptoms of COVID-19. The decision is quite simple, does not require a medical assessment. If they present or indicate any symptoms consistent with COVID-19, we immediately send them home and have them go under quarantine restriction and can only return to the school or work site with a doctor's note releasing or clearing them, or a COVID test demonstrating negative, the viral test, or have completed the quarantine period as determined by the school district in cooperation with the Department of Health. So I don't want our community to have any misconception that not having a health tech in our clinics any way inhibits our ability or process to take appropriate steps to keep the school environment safe and as healthy as we possibly can. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. Board members, Mr. Hilliard read off quite a few numbers from that survey, and I had requested from Mr. Colucci last night, after hearing the recorded calls, to share that information with us so we didn't have to try to process all of those numbers. So I emailed that to all of you today, as well as Dr. Mullins, so you would have that information. But I think there was an important point that was made, and that is that our teachers need to know that their best is good enough. And I think that's true. I think absolutely we understand that things are not going to be perfect. And I've had the opportunity, I think over the past 2 days, I've been with Dr. Mullins for community presentations, and I've heard him say, we are never our best on day one, but we will bring our best each and every day, and we'll continue to get better. And I think there is much truth to that with what's going on in our schools. So I encourage our teachers to keep their head up and know that we absolutely support them and understand their struggles. But you know, we heard some great examples of people who are managing the hybrid teaching platforms well. And so I'm wondering, Dr. Mullins and Dr. Sullivan and Ms. Klein, if there's an opportunity for us to capitalize on those people that have found a groove and are feeling very successful in that environment, to maybe help them to share what's working with their peers. I know I mentioned a couple board meetings ago that we had our group of 6th grade teachers who had developed an online Facebook group and were supporting each other and sharing resources and that sort of thing. I wonder if there's just some opportunity for us to have those who are feeling successful with the current challenge to maybe share how they're finding that success. So I have faith that you guys will address the issue and provide that support, but just wanted to throw that thought process out there. Okay, that is going to move us into the consent agenda. Dr. Mullins.
There are 11 items under this category.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. Does any board member wish to pull any item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to accept the consent items as presented.
I move, so moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. McDougall, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Is there any discussion? Please vote. The motion passes 5-0. I will now recess the regular school board meeting and convene the final public hearing. Good evening. This is the second and final public hearing for the 2020-2021 proposed millage rates and tentative budget. The hearing of September 10th, 2020 is now in session. We will now move into the presentation portion of this hearing. Dr. Mullins.
Madam Chair and members of the board, Ms. Cindy Lasinski, Chief Financial Officer, will make a presentation on the proposed 2020-21 budget and millage levy. Ms. Lisinski, and Ms. Karen Strickland, Director of Budgeting.
Good evening, board members. This is the second and final public hearing on the proposed millage and tentative budget for fiscal year '21. Tonight's public hearing will include remarks regarding the proposed millage and budget. It will include public comments, board discussion, adoption of the total millage, and adoption of the '21 tentative budget. So let me start by explaining what TRIM is. The Truth in Millage legislation was enacted in 1980 to redirect taxpayers' concern over rising taxes from the property appraisers who do not control the levying of taxes toward the government taxing authorities that set the tax rates. The Truth in Millage legislation requirements are detailed under Florida statutes. TRIM timelines are very prescriptive in law, and the clock started July 1st. The total timeline to budget adoption is 80 days. The statute dictates the order of business during the budget hearings, and TRIM requires 2 public hearings for open discussion of millage rates and proposed budgets of all taxing authorities, and this is the second hearing. Millage is a term that represents the tax rate levied on real estate and other property. 1 mill is equivalent to $1 in taxes per thousand in taxable value. So if your home has a taxable value of $100,000 and you're assessed a 1 mill tax rate, you will pay $100 in taxes. The Florida Education Finance Program, or the FEFP, is the mechanism by which the state and local funds are allocated to Florida school districts. The Florida legislature sets the required local effort millage rates. This is the local portion of the FEFP calculation. The school board must levy the RLE millage rates in order to receive any state funding under the Florida Education Finance Program. The total proposed millage related to school funding for FY21 school year is 5.942. This millage will generate revenue for the general operating and the capital outlay funds. Using the proposed millage rate at the 20 taxable property value of $48.7 billion, our total projected tax levy is approximately $278 million at a 96% collection rate. The required local effort and discretionary millage makes up the local operating funds. The capital outlay millage is levied for local capital improvement. The full basic discretionary millage will garner $35 million. If any school district levies the full .748 mill levy and it generates an amount of funds per FTE that is less than the state average, the school district will receive a discretionary millage compression supplement. And in our case, we will receive $7.8 million to get us up to the state average. The local capital improvement millage, or LCI, will provide the district $70.2 million. $35.3 million comes off the top and is used to pay the district's debt service, which covers principal and interest payments for previously bonded debt that was issued primarily between the years 1996 and 2008 to build schools and provide for major renovations at our older schools. LCI contributes $10.3 million towards the maintenance costs for labor. LCI also pays for the district's property insurance, which leaves $19.6 million for capital needs projects throughout the district. That includes facility renewal and repair, replacing old school buses, computer refresh, and placing educational technology in our schools. So this side depicts the historic millage rates over the last 10 years. Since FY13, the millage rates have declined each year. This has been the trend because of the growth of property values. Lawmakers reduced the RLE millage rate to limit the revenue generated from this source. This is a conscious effort to ensure that revenues received are not greater than the previous year, which reduces the tax burden on homeowners. This year, the RLE was reduced by 1.55 mils. As required by TRIM, we must compare the proposed millage rate to the rollback rate. The rollback rate is the millage rate that would generate the same amount of revenue as last year, if applied to the current year's adjusted taxable value. Said another way, the state rolls back the rate as property values increase to bring the total dollars available roughly equivalent to the prior year. Under TRIM, the rollback rate is the basis for determining if tax rates have increased or decreased. The state tries to get the rollback rate as close as possible to the proposed millage rate. The rollback rate is generally less than the proposed tentative rate. So when the rollback rate is less than the proposed millage rates that we receive from the state, we must actually advertise a tax increase. For Brevard Public Schools, the proposed millage rate is 2.49% higher than the rollback rate. So the notice of proposed tax increase was advertised in the Florida Today on July 25th. So it's interesting to review Brevard's tax assessment history beginning with 2007 and 2008. This is the last time the state experienced a significant economic downturn. Notice there was a 2-year lag from the 0708 economic downturn and the impact to tax roll. Property values have increased each year since 2012 and 13. Keep in mind the FY 2021 current tax assessment is pre-COVID values. The Office of Economic Demographic Research held their estimating conference on August 7th to adopt a new forecast for tax roll assessments. And the projected growth for the next year, although positive, is 2% and then 3.1% for 22 and 23. So that is not depicted on this slide, but when you see the growth of 7.43%, then 7.23%, next year it's going to be projected at 2%, and the following year 3.1%. So it's still positive, it's just not at the same level as it has been for the last 10 years. While the residential sectors remain steady and keep the 2021 tax roll positive, the economic effects from the coronavirus are expected to have the greatest impact on non-residential sectors as commercial property becomes vacant, idled, or lower income producing. So this example shows how a homeowner property tax is calculated and compares tax year 2019 and 2020 with no increase in assessed value. In this example, a homeowner with an assessed value of $225,000 with the homestead exemption will pay about $1,217 in tax year 19 and $28.80 less the next year in 20 to school-related property tax to Brevard County. So homeowners would be paying less in taxes for the same assessed value the following year. So what does the property tax we pay for education mean to our families? The average family will pay about $1,039 in property taxes on a home assessed at $200,000 earmarked for the public schools. And over the course of 1 year, that averages out to $2.85 a day. And you can see that $2.85 a day is critical in serving our children's education. There is no greater indicator in a child's future than his or her education. As parents, We worry over the quality of schools because we know a strong education is essential to opening so many doors for our child's future, be it success in college, the labor market, and being able to provide for a productive and joyful life. Families move to Brevard in order to provide their children that opportunity. And as a community, we all need to take this charge incredibly seriously. And I have the good fortune to work and serve with incredible educators that lead the way in the state of Florida in providing an excellent education. $2.85 a day pays for the things a school needs to educate our children at the highest standards, which in turn makes for a strong community and makes Brevard an economic leader in the state. So now I'm going to pass this off to Ms. Strickland, who is going to talk about the proposed tentative budget.
This is the proposed budget we are asking you to take action on and adopt this evening. It is shown by fund, our general fund, our debt service fund, our capital projects funds, our special revenue funds, which now includes the CARES Act, our internal service fund, and our enterprise fund. They are shown as in fund which is designated and prescribed by the Florida Department of Education in accordance with Governmental Accounting Standards Board guidelines. So that's why it's presented in that type of structure. The next slide is exactly the previous slide, only it has more detail in it. The very top portion of the slide, still by fund, now the funds are off to the side. The very top portion is our beginning fund balance as we open the books this July 1, with our revenues increasing that fund balance, our expenditures taking away from that fund balance, any transfers in from one fund to another or transfers out from one fund to another. And then we have our ending fund balance there about midway down the page. At the very bottom is the designation required by GASB 54 as to how the fund balance is breaking out non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, or unassigned. And I'd like to draw your attention to the operating fund. We began the fund balance at the beginning of the year was $63 million. Right now we're projecting at the end of this fiscal year, June 30, it'll be at $83 million, but that's only because we have 3 reserve line items there, 2 of them to be bargained with the unions. One is the teacher salary increase allocation, and the other is the health insurance trust fund commitment. There is also $2.8 million that is yet to be committed. Once these items have been committed, they will be incorporated into the expenditure budget and expenditure line items, and they will no longer be recorded as reserves. Our next steps from my office is that we need to let the Florida Department of Education know about our millage rate and our final budgets. We also need to send that information to the Florida Department of Revenue as well as the Brevard County Tax Collector so that they may start collecting those taxes on our behalf.
Ms. Belford, before you go to public comment or board questions, Ms. Strickland, can I ask you to go back to the two previous slides? I just want to make an emphasis.
Yes, sir.
Because very often our community and community members have questions about the fund balance that is represented. So the fund balance at July 1 was $63 million, and I'm literally reiterating what Ms. Strickland said just for clarification to our community. The fund balance projected at the end of this fiscal year of $83 million is really inclusive of unallocated or committed revenue that we know exists. But again, $12.1 million came from the state that is earmarked as essentially a categorical that must be utilized for teacher salary allocation according to legislation. We're in the process of discussing that with the union right now and have to provide to the state the plan for the utilization of those funds by October 1st. But they haven't been allocated, they haven't been committed, so they have to be carried as uncommitted at the time. That's why they're falling in today at the end in the fund balance. That is going to change as soon as it is negotiated and they're committed. In addition, I presented to the board probably 8 weeks ago now, approximately $8 million in budget cuts that we implemented going into this fiscal year And the expenditures against those budget cuts included a $4.7 million allocation to our health insurance trust fund. That $4.7 million, because it has not been expended or committed yet, it too is falling to the fund balance at the end of this fiscal year, which won't be the case as soon as the expenditure is committed. And the only then remaining amount of approximately $2.8 million is the uncommitted that remains from the budget savings for this year that I presented to the board, again, about 8 weeks ago. So just wanted to make sure our community, our board understands our fund balance, although suggests it's going to be significantly higher at the end of this year, that is not the case. So I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mullins. Do any board members have any questions for Ms. Lisinski before we open for public comment? Ms. Deskovich?
It's not necessarily a question, but I do think we need to explain to our community, and maybe you're not prepared tonight because I didn't give you any forewarning, but maybe sometime in the near future, because I have a feeling if we've got some people watching this that have been following it for a few years, our total budget number has increased dramatically over the last couple years, when clearly we're still struggling to do some ordinary things. And we know why, because of increases from the state, which is already assigned to growth and security and some different areas that they've mandated already where we have to spend it. But the general person looking at this will say, oh my gosh, if I track over the last few years their total budget, why is their budget increased so much? So maybe we get a one-pager or a graphic out or something to show why that has happened, because I know I'm going to get hit with that question in the next few days.
Okay, absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments from board members before we open for public comment? I will just say once again, Ms. Lisinski, thank you so much for bringing it back to what really is important in the district. You, obviously, it's about the numbers in the budget, and sometimes that can get a little dry for our folks, but I appreciate so much that you continue to focus on really what the impact is for our students on all of these numbers that are coming forward. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, that's what it's about.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And just for our public, I think I have said this every year since I have been on the board, we are asked to notify the state of what our final millage is, but we really have no say in what our final millage is. The state tells us what we will charge our community for millage. And so us approving it really is kind of a ceremonial thing more than anything. We have no ability to raise that or lower that, so I think that's important for the community to know as well.
Ms. Belford?
Yes, Ms. Campbell.
And just to add on to what you just said, because many people sometimes look at Brevard and the growth that we have and say we have homes going up right and left, and why isn't, and it's partly because the number that we get from the state, this is the number that you shall charge to the public for taxes, then all that money goes to the state, to the pot, and then is redistributed through the FEFP finance program. So it's not just as simple as we're having growth, we should have more money. It's not the way it's calculated. Actually, while we're adding requests, I had a request from a community member because I started to explain the FAFP and how it's complicated, and I went to a 2-day workshop trying to get a FEFP 101. If there is a resource that we could send, just the community members, anyone who really wants to dig into it, to how the FEFP is formulated, if there's like a FEFP for dummies kind of thing. Something that they wouldn't have to go to a 2-day workshop like I did. But the training I received was from FSBA. But if there's something for the public, a public-facing document, actually I looked in the budget book and you guys did a pretty good job. But if there's something that we could refer them to, if you could send that to me, I'd love to send that out to some people who have asked me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Okay, is there any individual that would like to address the board on the 2020-2021 proposed millage levy? Is there any individual that would like to address the board on the 2020-2021 proposed millage levy? Is there any individual that would like to address the board on the 2020-2021 tentative budget? Mr. Francisco, I believe we have one recorded speaker on the budget.
And I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Facility Services for Brevard Public Schools.
Kyle Savage. Good evening. My name is Kyle Savage. I'm the treasurer of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Mullins, Ms. Belford, and members of the board for this opportunity to speak. And additionally, I would like to thank Ms. Lewinsky, the new CFO for Brevard Public Schools, who has always been available when I ask for information. I'm very grateful for that. Year over year, BFT has talked about salary lapse and raises not costing what is projected. Well, the final budget documents show once again this year that projected raises of $12 million only actually increased instructional salary spending by $2.5 million. Additionally, last year, lapse money was identified in the amount of $14.9 million into the general fund budget and was used on salaries. This year, $9.7 million of lapse money has been identified and will be used on health insurance. It sure seems like a lot of your priorities are covered with teacher lapse money. I'm not here to tell you that Brevard Public Schools won't have a tough financial year because of COVID-19. However, last week, the Brevard Federation of Teachers returned to the bargaining table with a pared down list of proposals for the 2021 school year contracts. I can personally tell you that prior to COVID-19, we were ready to address the supplement scale that hasn't seen a raise since 2015. We were ready to talk about maternity leave in excess of 6 to 8 weeks for our soon-to-be mothers. We were ready to talk about paternal leave for our fathers as well. However, we realized that this is a pandemic, and we realized that we had to be responsible as well. So I'm here tonight commenting on the budget to ask you, please don't treat negotiations this year like we are purchasing a used car at your dealership. It's not enjoyable. Your teachers don't enjoy it. And more than that, the community does not like seeing the teachers not treated properly at negotiations. Treat your teachers like they are part of the team this year with negotiations. You may be surprised by the results. Thank you.
Is there any other individual that would like to address the board on the 2020-2021 tentative budget? The public comment portion of this hearing is now closed. That will bring us to recommendations for the adoption of the 2020-2021 proposed millage levy and tentative budget. Dr. Mullins?
Ms. Belford, if I may ask for personal privilege to address Mr. Savage's comments this evening, because I think it's essential that I provide clarification to some of the information that has been suggested. I just find, I find Mr. Savage's comments surprising and, well, quite frankly, a little disappointing. Mr. Savage and the union reached out to us approximately in January of this year and raised question as to the cost of the raises that were bargained and agreed upon for the fiscal year 1920, suggesting that there was a cost of $6 million for the raise against the $12 million projected cost of the raise. That certainly raised my concern and alarm that, number one, we could potentially have had such a incorrect projection of the cost of the raise, not to mention what the implications would be. I immediately reached out to staff and charged them with identifying in detail what the true cost of the raises were for our teacher group and then across the entire district, so that we could meet with and present that information with the union, regardless of what the outcome was. I have to tell you that Ms. Lisinski, Dr. Theddy, and Ms. Lisinski's staff worked tirelessly for over 2 weeks to provide a detailed, exact evaluation of the cost of teacher raises for this organization. Line by, I can't even tell you how many thousands of lines the spreadsheet required to do this level of detailed analysis. We then, they concluded their evaluation and their analysis, and in fact confirmed that the cost of the teacher raises was within amazingly dollars of the estimate of the projection of 12 million. We invited Mr. Savage and Mr. Colucci into my conference room, met with my staff for approximately 2 hours, and went through the entire spreadsheet on the big screen, item by item, detail by detail, and explained exactly how the cost of the raises translated into $12 million. At the conclusion of that conversation, I wasn't there, but I was informed, and Mr. Savage can certainly clarify. I will not make a claim that I'm quoting him, but it's my understanding. And quite frankly, I would have not been disappointed if we overestimated the cost of the raises. That would be a benefit to the organization. And like me, Mr. Savage responded, well, I wish we were right, but I can't argue that this isn't correct. So I'm caused pause because we worked so hard to demonstrate and validate our calculations, presented it openly and transparently to the union. But tonight I hear now Mr. Savage is suggesting the cost of the raises was $2.5 million. So I would welcome the union to come back in and look at the calculations again, and any member of our public, because I will not suggest anything but full transparency of this organization on the finances that we have. Second, I will not dispute that we have teacher salary lapse. We also have classified employee salary lapse. We also have administrative staff salary lapse. We report that out every year. I presented it to the board 8 weeks ago, what our projected salary lapse was, and the commitments we have against that lapse. We currently have commitments of $3.1 million every year to our health insurance trust fund against salary lapse, a portion of which is covered by teacher salaries, no question, but teachers also make up 66% of our health insurance trust fund. So when we contribute $3.1 million to the health insurance trust fund from teacher salary lapse, that money is going back into the services and compensation that serve our teachers, just like our other employees. We also have a $2.9 million workers' compensation cost against our fund balance at the end of every year. But workmen's compensation supports our entire organization, including our teachers who have to be supported through workmen's compensation. Finally, I recommended to the board that we take $5 million this year of our lapse, non-recurring lapse funds, and put it into our health insurance trust fund, because we know, and the union agrees, our health insurance fund is at a critical funding situation. But I would again remind the board and our community that the salary lapse that comes as a result of all of our employees, those dollars are then, that $5 million is going to the health insurance trust fund that is supported by 66% of our health fund is taking care of teachers. So we use our dollars that are available to us to benefit all of our employees, including teachers. So teacher salary lapse is reinvested into the services and the programs and the benefits and the compensation that we have for our teachers, as well as our other employees, as we all work to contribute to a healthy financial organization. So you can tell I'm a bit emphatic, but I'm going to be when it's suggested that our organization isn't being prudent, responsible, and transparent with our dollars. I take enormously serious the responsibility to be transparent to our public, our taxpayers, and ensure them, whether we've had some good, bad, and ugly, And I have openly and transparently demonstrated how we will make it right, and we will take responsibility. But this is a situation I could not allow to pass, and anyone to leave that comment and suggest we have not accurately and carefully and responsibly utilized the dollars for the benefit of our teachers, but also for the benefit of our approximately 4,000 other employees across the organization. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide that clarification, and again, welcome Mr. Savage and any other individual to come and review our budget, sit with members of my staff, and understand line item by line item what has been budgeted, what has been expended, and what may be falling as potential lapse. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins.
Okay, I think I now am supposed to read the next part.
Yes, we are now at the adoption of the 2020-2021 proposed millage levy and tentative budget.
Florida Statute 200.065 requires each taxing authority levying millage to publicly state the name of the taxing authority, the rolled back rates, the percentage of change from the rolled back rate, and the millage rate to be levied prior to the adoption of the millage levy resolution. In compliance with those requirements, the following needs to be stated. The taxing authority is the School Board of Brevard County, Florida. The 2020-21 rollback rates are required local effort, 3.6560. Local discretionary, 0.7125. Capital outlay, 1.4289. Total rollback rate, 5.7974. The total millage rate to be levied exceeds the total rolled back rate by 2.49%. The proposed 2020-21 millage rates are required local effort, 3.694. Local discretionary, 0.748. Capital outlay, 1.500. Total millage rate, 5.942. There are a total of 6 separate motions. I will read each of the recommendations into the record and request board action. Number 1, adopt the resolution setting the required local effort, local discretionary, and capital outlay millage rate of 5.942 mils for 2020-21. The written resolution is incorporated into this motion by reference.
What are the wishes of the board? Moved by Ms. Campbell, seconded by Ms. McDougall. Any discussion? Please vote.
Ms. Belford?
Yes.
My screen will not allow me to get down to my actual vote.
Yeah, mine's giving me a fit too.
For some reason, it was doing it, I was the last bit on the bottom before, but now it has moved up to. I can try to refresh my screen if you give me a minute, but I think it's going to be consistent. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I can't get down there. So we can do a voice vote if you need to?
Ms. Escobar, can you take a voice vote? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins.
Number 2, adopt the 2020-21 budget in the following amounts. Operating, $656,403,530. Special revenue, $123,531,191. Debt service, $35,692,036. Capital outlay, $253,588,800. Enterprise, $4,347,919. Subtotal, $1,073,563,476. Less transfers, $57,390,645. Total, total, $1,016,172,831. Internal service, $81,686,708.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Is there any discussion? Please vote.
I fixed my screen resolution.
Good, okay. The motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins.
Number 3, authorize the superintendent to adjust the adopted millage levy and budget due to changes in the certified tax roll.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. McDougall. Any discussion? Please vote. The motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins?
Number 4, authorize the superintendent to forward the adopted millage levy resolution to the Brevard County property appraiser and tax collector no later than 30 days following the adjournment of the Value Adjustment Board.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Any discussion? Please vote.
Looks like Pam already voted for it.
Voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins?
Motion 5, authorize the superintendent to forward the following to the designated state agencies. A, the adopted budget, millage levy resolution, certified tax roll, rolled back rates, proposed millage, and certified copies of the advertisements for the proposed budget and millage rate to the State Department of Education. B, the millage levy resolution, certified tax roll, rolled back rates, proposed millage, and certified copies of the advertisements for the proposed budget and millage rate to the Department of Revenue.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Any discussion? Please vote. Need a voice vote, Pam? Okay. And the motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins?
Motion 6, approve the release of $1,461,868 in committed fund balance to pay the cost of instructional coaches, school athletic assistants, and other expenditures for fiscal year 2020-21.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. McDougall. Is there any discussion? Please vote.
And my name is not coming up. I'm so sorry.
Ms. Belford, I had a comment on that, but it didn't affect our vote, so I just went ahead and voted.
Give me
Okay.
just 1 second. Do we need a voice vote from us? So
Yeah, I can't, it's not coming up.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. Ms. Duskovich.
I just wanted to confirm that that's the last allocation out of the fund balance for the instructional coaches and such, correct? So this is the final year that they are funded?
That is correct. If the board recalls, there was 3 years of revenue set aside for those initiatives. Actually, that revenue that was originally committed came to an end at the end of this last year. We committed the additional funds for this as a result of hurricane reimbursement from FEMA to be able to continue this initiative for 1 more year. At this time, we do not have additional allocated funds to carry that initiative beyond the fiscal year 2021.
Does that, that seems like a lower amount than I recall. So does this also include, there was a couple of SROs and social workers in that same three-year, does this include that, or is this just instructional coaches and athletic assistants?
It only includes those things that are listed. As we've received additional mental health allocation from the state, we've been able to secure the funding for those social workers through that recurring funding source from the state. So those social worker positions are secured moving forward, whereas we'll have to reevaluate the instructional coaches.
Great, thank you so much.
Any additional comments, questions? All right, then this hearing is now adjourned and the regular meeting is reconvened. Dr. Mullins.
We'll move on to the action agenda. Item G29 is procurement solicitations.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Ms. Duskovich, was that a second? Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Duskovich. Is there any discussion? Please vote. And the motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins?
Item G30 is on department school-initiated agreements.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Duskovich. Any discussion? Please vote. And the motion passes 5-0. We are now at board member discussion points and reports. Mr. Susan asked to have discussion items added on school mascot changes, board athletics policy 7511, and volunteer background checks. Mr. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairperson Belford. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to bring this forward. In dealing with the school mascot changes, what I noticed was I was looking around, and there was no policy or procedure inside of our school board policies and procedures. No administrative actions. There's nothing that says a process for the renaming of a mascot or even renaming of a school. Because if you read our current policy 7250, it only allows us to name those schools. It doesn't say anything about renaming. So when I was looking at this, being the fact of all the other factors that people want to bring in and everything else, I truly believe that in order to bring forward a policy or an action to rename one, that we should have a policy wrapped around those movements. And so we can debate whether it should be or shouldn't be, but my argument is that if we don't have a policy, and we need to have one in order to move forward, that the no policy then falls under the management control and operation 1001.32 of our statutes, which says that we have as a school board the power to rename, or I'm sorry, we have the power to, we basically have the power for anything that is not found illegal or inside the statutes. So if that makes sense. My goal here is literally, if we're going to move forward into this contentious area of mascots and schools, which we all know is going to happen, we should do a policy wrapped around it and do it right. That's it. And without one, we're treading in areas that are very, when you don't have a policy or procedure and you're allowing stuff to start happening, it's tough. That's all. And if you're doing checkers, for everybody that's out there not playing chess, not checkers, this isn't a move to stop anything. This is just saying we need to put a policy in place to make it happen. And whatever the policy or procedures that are happening now would be strengthened and be more inclusive of community and everything else as the other policy says for naming facilities. That's all. So I open that up for discussion.
I tend to agree with you, Mr. Susan. I think the writing on the wall is more of this is coming our way. I haven't really had time to read through Ms. Ingrata's process, but as it looks right now, if this came up at 2 or 3 different schools, there may potentially be 2 or 3 different processes, and potentially things could look unfair. And it looks like it could be a long-term issue. And I see no problem with moving forward with us. And, it'll take a few months to just put something in place, a general policy that may direct it back to schools to create. It may say something, but for us to be silent probably would cause chaos and inequities between how it's handled.
Ms. McDougall?
Yeah. I look at a mascot as something that as part of the school. This is a school function. It's the community function. It would be students, community, and the principal and the administration there. And I'm concerned that we're going to come into an area that really is not ours. That I don't know of any others. Have we ever weighed in on any mascot? And why would we? Because I would think that like I said, the students, the community and administration would vote on what would they like for their school. And so I get nervous when it feels like we're intruding on the running of a school.
Can I respond? No, I agree with you 100%, Ms. McDougall. When I looked at the policy, I looked at, any policies or past practices. Because what we do in the past determines almost just as much as policy, as we've learned from Mr. Gibbs over our graduations and stuff like that. Being the fact that we don't have any precedent on renaming a school or a mascot, then there is no precedent set with no policy set. We are in an area where I just feel uncomfortable. And I'm not saying that the validity behind things is what it is. That's why I didn't want to say names. I didn't want to bring up anything. This is more about our structure as a board and our bringing forward strong policies to include, there's a lot of stuff like that was inside the naming policy that is not inside of Ms. Ingrata, who has a good process. That was a good one. But like feeder school input, timetables, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be added. And I think we would vote, the validity of our school district is determined on our processes. This is one that I think, and if, like Ms. Teskovich said, we're only putting a little bit of time in place to make sure it's done right. And we've done that over and over again with everything that we do. That's all. Just asking for that.
So you're saying that we are going to jump in to a functioning of a school. That's what I'm hearing, because you say you want to give more time. And I think Ms. Ingrata, let's get real, it came up because of Edgewood has been suggested that they would like to look at their mascot. And I think there's plenty of time in that if we're going to get real and call it what we're calling it, and not just do a policy because this one particular school may want to have a mascot change. And there's no guarantee that that's going to pass. I just feel that we are intruding again on the function of a school.
Ms. McDougall, I would remind, I would disagree with the concept that this is a school's decision in the fact that there is no policy, procedure, or anything in place to allow them to do it. Plus, the state statutes guarantee us the management, control, operation, administration, and supervision of our schools. So with our policies in place and our procedures, it is us to manage, to control, operate, administer, and supervise our schools, which falls this into our realm. I am, again, not saying anything about the validity of what's happening. I am just saying that based upon our current statutes and policy, I would appreciate it if we could write a policy before moving forward, because this is going to be a contentious area, and I want to do it right, basically. That's all.
If I may weigh in, I'm not opposed to developing a policy and process. I don't think it's something that the board should vote on with regard to an actual recommendation. I think that should be left at the community level. We reopened South Lake 2 years ago. They chose their own mascot. We didn't have anything to do with it. I don't recall, we didn't have any discussion about Vieira Elementary mascot as a board. And I think it should remain a school-based issue. If we want to establish some minimum standards for the change process via policy, I don't have an issue with that. I think that's fine for us to do, to say at a very minimum, if you are going to go through a mascot change process, these are the steps that are necessary to be taken. I'm good with that. But I don't feel that it's an issue that should come before us for a vote. I think it's very much a community issue. So, I think we can get into the minutia of what that policy looks like going forward. If we can come to consensus as a board that we probably need to look at a minimum standard for that process. Would you be good with that, Ms. McDougall?
Not really.
Okay.
So I agree with Ms. Belford on that it's, I think probably to have something that would provide guidance. So that if it came up at a school, because we have had mascots, we have at our new elementary school and our when we opened in South Lake, some guidance, minimal guidance, so they can do it. I don't think you're going to do it the same way as an elementary school as you would at a secondary school, but some minimum guidance. I think we didn't recognize Mr. Gibbs. I'm assuming he's still on the line. You there, Mr. Gibbs? Oh.
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. We're just checking. Keep you on your toes. I think it would be good for Mr. Gibbs to do so, and staff to research if there are policies like that from Neola or other places. But again, just maybe for the idea of guidance, so that if something like this comes up, a principal can say, okay, where do I start? Are there some basic things that need to be done? Not that it would come to the board, but because honestly, when it comes to this issue that we've received emails back in the summer on this, I know I did. I don't know if the whole entire board did. I think a grassroots movement in something like this is excellent because you need to involve the community. I love the idea that things like this come from our students because they're thinking and they're they're trying to be compassionate but with adult guidance to be, hey, what's reasonable and to guide that procedure. But I think the grassroots movement can still be the initiated, right, by students, but have somewhere to go. And I would say just my thoughts on the process that's already been initiated by Ms. Ingrata at Edgewood is not that we put a policy in place and say, don't stop your process because we're fixing to come up with a policy that's going to change what you're doing. No, I think she should go ahead and that whatever we do moving forward is from here on.
You go with that, Ms. McDougall?
I can go with that.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we're going to ask Mr. Gibbs to come back to us for discussion on a
I would like
policy.
to just follow up hers in that, yes, Mr. Gibbs does have experience in this. He actually, in his last school board, they reviewed, did a review of all their mascots, and the school board made decisions on every
That
one.
was, just if I could jump, that wasn't Marion, that was Seminole County did that where they reviewed there. It was not my district.
So he has a process in place. I would also caution moving forward with anything right now until you get a process and procedures in place, because you're basically setting, it's moving forward without a process in place means that there is, basically that is the power of the board, unless there's a process or a policy. So it should come back to us for a decision. And it gets into a murky water where we're moving forward with something. I would say if we could peel back and say, okay, hold on, we're going to give you a process and procedure, come back in a couple of months, let them go through it. We got an email from Ms. Sullivan saying this is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. Let's just do it right. If you're playing, again, chess, not checkers, there is support for this coming. And this is not that. This is allowing a process to be put in place, which is what we do, and we don't move forward when we don't have that. That's all. This is the renaming of something when you have community and everything else that needs to be put into there. That's all.
Ms. Deskovich?
The policy could clearly say the school gets to do it. Like, I think as a board, that discussion comes. So I seems like that's the smarter, more prudent approach, is to have something in place that everyone is going to. And I just want to add, I think when this is addressed, probably work sessions or workshop, that we also need either in that same policy or another policy about changing a school name, because like we said, those are coming down the pike too. Might as well have it in place on how we want to handle that as a board before that stuff starts coming to us.
And I think we have policy on the process to change the name of a school.
Not change the name, just to name it.
Just to name it.
It
but I
doesn't
don't-
say anything about
There-
renaming.
No, I
There's a
thought
change.
there is yeah, I read that too.
Is it
There
the same
change.
policy?
And it really said that the name is there. If I read it right, that we can't change it.
Well,
Did I interpret it wrong?
yeah, there's a process there for us to change the name of a school. It requires community input, an 18-month period of community input. And I did not print and bring that policy with
Yeah, I
me.
did
I
my-
apologize.
Is that
Mr.
the same policy, 7250?
Section I.
I actually have that
It says the name of a new or existing school once adopted by the board shall be considered permanent. However, should the board subsequently initiate or be called upon to consider a name change of an existing previously named school, then in that event, the board shall allow a period of time not less than 18 months from said date for community involvement, deliberation, discussion, and debate prior to its taking action.
So that's on a name change.
Correct, not a
Right.
mascot.
I don't have a problem with us developing one. I do have a problem of stopping something that has been going on and say, oh, wait a minute, your process is not okay. If you look at that process, it is not going to happen overnight. It just isn't. If we get anything by January, I'll be surprised. So I feel we would be remiss to say, I'm so sorry, you can't go on with your process. When she already has things lined up for the next SAC meeting of at least 20 people speaking, then there's an ability to have 40. And then there's another SAC meeting in October where other people can sign up. So I question us stopping the process, Mr. Susan, unless we can come together quickly and get whatever policy you think we should have. Again, are we going to review every single mascot? I'm just curious. Are we going to every single school and review everybody's mascot?
Well, I think that's for discussion when a policy recommendation comes forward as to, what we really want that policy to look like. But Mr. Susan, if you look on the timeline, there's not even an opportunity for SAC to discuss the possibility of a vote before November 19th. And then if they don't feel like they are prepared by November 19th, then it postpones to January 21st. So, I would suggest that Ms. Ingrata is probably very open if there are aspects of this that you feel need to be tweaked. Speak to Dr. Sullivan and see if there's something else that needs to be included. But, our policy development process is 3 months, so I don't anticipate this resolving prior to that.
Let me ask you this, for point of order, have we ever allowed a process to move forward without policy and just said, well, it's moving forward, so let's just let it go? And the second part to it is that what is the rush? This has been the mascot there for, 50 years? There's no rush to do this. To do it right, to make sure that it's done right, to stall for 3-4 months, whatever, do it right. There's a lot of community upheaval right now over this. It gives them the right to come in and look at it from the fresh, to follow the process that's there, to give, it's a better process, and it's how we're governed already. We've never allowed somebody to start doing something and then just said, well, you're doing it already, it looks good, which it does, but we're going to allow you to do it, and then we're going to go write a policy while it's happening. That's just not good governance in my mind, that's all. And I would beg to say that we need to stall what's happening now, put together a proper process, come back to it, and 60-year name change, if it's found to change the name, couldn't wait 3 months. That's all. I'm just, that's how I feel.
Ms. Campbell, you look like you want to speak.
Well, I considering that the next two steps on their process are getting community, I mean, I don't know what it would look like if we would even be this specific in a policy, but, you know, to say this is the way that you have to get community input, or this is the timing between them. But since the next two things they're going to do are just about getting community input, specifically for their SAC committee, I would not want to pause that, because we can't get a policy, you know, for them, for these two steps at least. If we get this on, we have a work session or whatever, I don't know if we get as soon as, we already have something planned for the 22nd, but the first one in October, board work session or whatever in October, I don't, you know, we will already, they already have these two opportunities for community input, and I think the community is ready to speak. And so I would rather at least allow them to go ahead and walk through this process until such a time that we know that what we're looking at is very different from this.
And if we come up with a policy or a process that's different than what was already going on, what is the case then? Do we stop what they did, and after 2 long nights of going through community input and everything else, and say, well, you know what, you didn't do this, you didn't do that? Or while we're writing the policy, do we then feel pressured to follow some of the things that are already here based upon the fact that they're already going on, because we may be telling them? There's just a whole bunch of, it's a spaghetti mess. And it's just not. The other piece is that many of the people that are community that are saying that they don't feel like they had input originally. There's just a lot of not, if we're going to write a policy, I don't think we should be allowing another process to be going through while we're writing that policy. That's all. And I totally understand where you're coming from, Ms. Campbell, but the pressure that you would feel from trying to write a policy based on what's already happening.
I don't feel that pressure. I don't know that you do. I don't feel that pressure.
So you don't have a problem telling them that if they didn't follow part of the policy that we put together, that they need to stop after the second October meeting?
No, that's not what I said. You said I would feel pressure to feel like we needed to make the policy follow this. I don't feel that pressure. You know, we've just, I've just said that we should ask Mr. Gibbs to take a look and see what other districts have, because we always do, what Neola has, what's recommended, and then we take, you know, whatever we want of that, bits and pieces, piece together what is amenable to this board, and then we go with that. I have no pressure whatsoever on me personally to look at this piece of paper and say we need to do it just like this, or we need to make sure our policy doesn't mess up what they're doing.
This is my first time seeing this, and it's microscopic and on black paper, but are they only allowing 40 people to speak to this?
80 total.
I'm sorry?
There will be 80 total. 20 the first time, and I mean 40 the first meeting, and then 40 available spots the second meeting. And so far, they only have 20 signed up for the next meeting. So there's still 20 spots that people could sign up for this September meeting.
Mr. Gibbs, can you tell me if current sunshine law allows you to limit the number of speakers that are speaking, because this has to be a publicly noticed meeting, because SAC meetings should be?
You would not limit the people speaking. Like right now, I don't know why they're at 40. I'm guessing it's capacity of the room. I mean, they could have them outside waiting.
Looks like it's virtual.
But they're probably trying to keep the meeting under 3 hours.
But that's
possible too. If students are involved, they don't want the students up late. I don't know the full circumstances of the meeting. So,
but that breaks sunshine laws that you limit the speakers.
We limit
Actually, we can limit our speakers. And Ms. Ingrata, I'm quite certain if her 80 slots get filled, I'm sure that she would open up another opportunity for public input. I think that's the plan,
Right.
you know, but if she needs additional, I'm sure that she would open additional. Mr.
So
Susan, I'm sorry, Mr.
we
Gibbs.
generally limit to 30 minutes, and then at the end of the meeting, give an opportunity. I think is how most districts do it.
In the 4 years I've been on the board and 2 years before that I watched practically every meeting, I never saw this board turn away a speaker. I've seen you guys before I was even on the board sit here till midnight, 1 in the morning listening to speakers. And initially I didn't want to get into the weeds of this exact process, but limiting the public comments on it right out of the gate in box number 1 concerns me.
Mr. Gibbs, can you talk to the fact of allowing a process to go on that doesn't have a policy or a procedure in place currently, and we're writing a policy to that? Can you just give me your opinion on that? Do you feel secure with allowing that to happen, or would it be better, according to governance, to wait and write it and then go?
I don't blame him for hanging up.
Well, I'll wait on that one.
No, it was on here somehow, but Pam to the rescue. Thank you.
No route found.
He said he got dropped.
No routes found.
We got Russell, Jackie, everybody coming to the rescue.
Just call him on his cell phone and put it on the speaker. That's all that matters. Just call him on his cell, put it on the speaker.
Did you say? Said there's no route.
No routes found.
Even sounds like him, doesn't it?
Russell to the rescue. District phone. Russ has the magic touch.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Gibbs.
Hey.
All right, we have you back.
I'm gonna restate
And
it.
Mr. Susan had asked you to weigh in on your thoughts about allowing a process to move forward when a policy is in process.
Sure. I don't have a problem with it, per se. This has been the procedure, or this is how the district's done it, I guess, in the past. They've allowed schools to implement this. So I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with us doing it. It's going to take, once a policy is actually written and developed, 90 days, of course, to get it written. So it wouldn't be ready until January or so. But it's a board decision. So if the board wants to do their policy and implement it or let them go, that's the board's decision.
Mr. Gibbs, I was asking and I just wanted to make point of clarification. There's never been a mascot change that I could go back 40 years, so it's kind of a new thing as opposed to just a naming of a mascot. So there's not prior precedence. You are aware of that, right?
Right. I know that we've always left the naming of the mascots in the schools up to the mascots at the schools, even when they're new, to the school and their process. So.
But there's never been a renaming of a mascot.
Right. But they still get to name their mascot, even when like Ms. Belford said, the one that reopened I'd heard about prior to tonight. They picked their own mascot, so.
And then in the event that, for proper governance, can you tell me what would be a better form of passing the policy? Would it be that having a current policy and allowing, working on a policy as another entity is running with what may not be that policy at the exact same time? Or is it better that you write the policy and then enact it afterwards?
I don't know that either one would be better than the other. It happens all the time. Laws are getting passed and done, and they're implemented later on, and any actions taken after that date, it would apply to it. And everything done before that date, it doesn't apply to it. So that's a routine thing with legislation in general.
But usually in legislation, there's actual legislation that you have that you're amending or changing. In this case, there's no renaming of a mascot in a policy or procedure.
Well, yeah, there's a naming, so they have I guess the schools have in the past gotten to establish how they're going to do it on their own. For consistency purposes, I think the setting up minimum standards isn't a bad idea, just so you don't have one school doing it this way and one school doing it that way. But for purposes of this school's already started and going, and the board's bringing it up in the middle. I don't have a problem. If the board has a problem with it and wants to interrupt that process, that's, like I said, that's the board's decision on that. But yeah, I don't have a problem one way or the other. It happens all the time in legislation and legislation drafting.
In the time that I've been on this board, I have never, ever been a part of a policy where we allow something to continue to go on before we have the policy. We've always said that we want to write a policy and then move forward with it. So I truly believe here today, and I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, that we as the school board should write the policy, then move forward with it. And I also believe that it's ultimately the school board's decision in the end, just like the renaming of the facilities and everything else and the past precedents with those. So I'll finish with that if anybody else wants to give input, but I think I've stated my case.
Thank you, Mr. Susan, and I would suggest that there are things that go on all the time within our district that we have not yet written policy for. I trust that Dr. Sullivan will continue to work with Ms. Ingrata to ensure that she's doing her best to get the input, but I'm not hearing from the majority of the board that they would like to at least pause that process for now. Feel certain that we can bring concerns if there are elements of the process to be included, but I think this is a slow-moving train at this point.
The process for renaming this didn't follow the process for naming this, a normal naming process either. So the way they went about making the change and deciding on the change was never followed any other prior precedent. And so now we're allowing the change and then the proceeding after that to be completely new. And that's where I'm at. That's all.
I'm suggesting that we will likely have policy in place, or at least pretty clear discussion on where that policy is going prior to this process finishing. And if there are elements that we feel need to be included, I'm sure that Dr. Sullivan and Ms. Ingrata would be more than happy to include those elements going forward. So, Mr. Gibbs, if you would please prepare for a discussion on a policy regarding mascot identification and changes going forward.
Okay.
And Mr. Susan, the floor is once again yours on athletics and background checks.
Okay.
Oh, hold on, Ms. McDougall.
I want to make sure we're really clear. So I want to make sure it's very clear for our, Dr. Sullivan and Principal Ingrata, that they can go on to get public hearing at this point. correct? We
I
are
would-
not stopping their process.
I would say public input.
Correct,
Yes.
exactly.
And I'm sure that Dr. Sullivan will address the issue of limited speakers as well. Good? All right, Mr. Susan, athletics?
So currently, we've got a athletics policy that I sent to you guys, and it is just kind of a benign little policy, and it doesn't state anything as far as nuts and bolts. And then we have this really, really long procedure from 2009 that touches a lot of different things that we haven't been putting into practice and we haven't been doing, right? Charging $250 a game, yada, yada, yada. So I was talking to Dr. Mullins, and I didn't want to give board direction without your support. But what it is that there are some things inside of there, that procedure, that prior to our game starting would probably be better to work up and bring back, including we're in the middle of a COVID crisis. So we want to try to allow as many people to cover the games as possible. We also want background checks. We want insurance to make sure that these guys are covered. Things that maybe not have been going on before. So we want to just put those in place. So before I said, Dr. Mullins, we need to do this, I figured I'd bring it before the board, see if the board feels the same way, and we can reach out with them with any concerns, or maybe even state it here, that we can give Dr. Mullins direction. He can change the procedure before the meeting, the school, the football and every activity start. That's the reason I brought it up. Does anybody have any other questions on it?
I'm looking at 7511. Is there a procedure to go with it you're referring to?
Mm-hmm. Long one.
If you go to go to the drop down, and then you click on it, instead of policies, go to administrator, and it's very lengthy. And we
I was actually surprised to see the $250 live stream, $750 telecast. I didn't realize we did that.
We don't.
Oh,
And it's just something that I think Ms. Moore, rightfully so, is trying to move forward with putting something in place so that we can deal with this. And this was our actual procedures and policies, or I'm sorry, procedures, so she pushed it forward. And I'm just saying that we should probably address it prior to the game starting. We should do some things. And it just, one of the things that I will stand for is that we allow the media outlets to come and we don't limit them. Florida Today has covered for 30, 40 years our games. Space Coast Daily covers. Brevard, there's Brevard Sports, 321 Sports, Channel Spectrum News. Like, these are our kids. And their highlight films in future lives for the next 20, 30 years will be off of these videos and stuff like that. So I didn't want to limit that. And I really was wanting to put some structure around the insurance and the other stuff. That's all.
Is there something, could you give us, can you at least a top 3 things or whatever that you would like to see changed in
No
this
chart,
policy? You
no.
just want us to look
Sure.
at it?
I felt like Dr. Mullins had a good grasp on it, but don't charge for the games because you're going to limit the amount of games that get covered for the kids. If the kids are being covered, then everybody will. The next one is some kind of a credentialing system so that if they act inappropriately, they can be pulled. Make sure they have insurance, make sure they have background checks, and then everything else we can work out later. But just getting that initiated to make sure off the bat. That's all. More access for our kids, safer.
Ms. McDougall?
Mr. Susan, I want to make sure, I don't disagree, but do any of these outlets, media outlets, charge our families to look, to view at their film? I want to make sure, because if we're not charging them, is
Are
it
they
fair that
getting a
they're
financial
charging our
benefit?
public?
Yeah,
I just want to make sure.
I guess
that
like
that's not
if
happening.
Spectrum Sports covered, you have to pay a cable fee. Space Coast Daily does not charge.
Right, I know they don't.
The 321 Sports did not charge. Florida Today, I think you have 3 or 4 articles you have for free, and then all you have to do is you pay a price, I guess. But there's no like subscription fee to charge people to watch a certain game that I know of, except for the FHSAA, and you know how I feel about that. That's a whole nother war that I would like to go into. But right now, no. And I think the other piece is that you've got some smaller organizations. Hometown News sometimes shows up. Viera Voice sometimes shows up. Titusville's probably got one. I just don't want to limit them. That's all. Some of those articles, those kids hang on their walls forever.
So, Dr. Mullins, are you clear on the elements of that Mr. Susan has concern around? Because the board doesn't approve administrative procedures. I mean, sometimes they're attached to our policies, but you have the freedom to change those procedures without a board vote on that.
Correct, yes. I've been in conversation with Ms. Moore already about it. Quite frankly, the administrative procedure, this is one of the more extensive administrative procedures that we have as a district, and just became more aware of it towards the end of last week. So I think Ms. Moore would agree we need some time to spend in the administrative procedure to understand maybe a little bit about the origin of why it was put in place several years ago, but also to look at where are we today, because it's a much different place today than we were when the procedure was put into place. And, you know, I default to what is reasonable and what is responsible. So what is reasonable in providing, you know, for our kids, but also what is responsible on behalf of the school board. So I don't know what the fees, I don't know if there's a charge to access the viewing. I don't know if there's advertising that the broadcaster would benefit from. Those are things we'd have to take a look at. We certainly want to be responsible. So, but at the same time, reasonable in an environment where we're going to be limiting gates to 25% capacity for safety and so on. So I think if we have a little bit more time, we do have a couple weeks before games commence. We'll do our best to work through this as quickly as possible.
Any board members have any additional comments, questions, concerns on the issue?
I would just say I appreciate that, and it's kind of, some of our policies have not been updated in a long time, but you think about this one's only about 11 years old, but think about where the world is and social media is. When this policy was written, you weren't live streaming anything off of Facebook. It existed, but you didn't have that capability, and now we're in a completely different technological world than we were in 2009. So I think that will be really good, especially for this year.
You good with that, Mr. Susan?
Absolutely.
Awesome. The floor is now yours again for volunteer background.
Ms. Belford, if I may, just another thought that we're going to have to, we have to work through these things. The reality is when we live stream athletic events, even if we have limited access to the game, we could be limiting our gate, which is the only source of revenue we have for those athletic programs. So I don't know what the intent was many years ago. Maybe that's what it was. We've got to try and dig that up. But, responsible includes what do we need to do to ensure the program's viability and that sort of thing. So I just want to be clear that there's several factors taken into consideration, and I know, Ms. Moore, getting some feedback from the board is very helpful. And again, we're in a very different place than we were many years ago, not just from a live streaming perspective, but from a COVID impact reality. So we'll work through it and bring something back to the board.
As long as, and I would say, as long as charging the fees does not inhibit more coverage for the kids, because we both know that, you're going to charge $250 for a thing is not going to make even a dent in an athletic budget, and it's going to limit the access. You know what I mean? That's all. That's all. And I have it again?
Yes.
Okay.
Volunteer background check.
So one of the reasons I brought this forward was there is a process that if you are an employee currently or a staff member or coach, you get you come forward, you get a background check, and if you have certain elements inside your application, they are sent up to the Professional Standards Practice Review Board. They look at those based upon a certain number of standards, and then they set back to the school district whether it's a plus or a positive or a negative. And they want to let that person either teach or coach or whatever that is. Currently, with our volunteer status, some of those practices and procedures that are inside of there don't mirror what that standard is. So what I would like to do is give Dr. Mullins direction, and he's kind of been working in there to try to mirror what standards we have for our employees and our coaches, the same with our volunteers, as far as background checks and everything else. And that's it. And Dr. Mullins already said that he knew about it. He's going to work on some stuff, had some ideas, and I thought that he could work on that and bring it back to the board. That's all. It's basically creating the same standard for employees, staff, and coaches as we do for our volunteers. That's it.
So currently, right now, I want to understand, Major Lanza, isn't that the sheriff's department? Don't you do a check on all of our volunteers?
do level 2 background check and other qualifications that are, it's a little different in volunteers and employees. Currently, we do a level 2 background check. It is a little different as far as the qualifications or disqualifications for the volunteers and the employees.
Can you?
I have 5 copies here. You can see there's several different.
I'm interested in how different it is, because I'm thinking that a volunteer typically is never by themselves. Is that correct? I mean, would a volunteer ever one-on-one work with a student without some kind of supervision?
A+ volunteer can work with students alone or on a group.
We actually have done away with A+ and gone to the level 2 background check for all of the volunteers, so all of them technically are cleared to work with students individually.
So what is a level 2? I mean, what is involved in a level 2? I'm sorry.
They take their fingerprints and they compare them to a national and local database and see what comes back as far as their criminal histories.
So I have a question, Mr. Susan, about, so right now we send them up to the state. How would we do that with the volunteers? I don't think there's a volunteer state database. I mean, I'm just curious. I'm not understanding.
Sure. So when a volunteer applies for to be a volunteer, they have to go through a level 2 background check, and then they have to put certain things down that may be on their application. Those certain things, if they are an employee or a staff member or a coach, would signal for them to send them up to Tallahassee to be reviewed. And there are certain processes that both the school board, law enforcement, the military, even nurseries are allowed to look at these things and then determine based upon those factors if that person deserves to be a part of the organization. That process is not in place for our volunteers. I'm just trying to make sure that we keep the level of standard that we do for our employees, for our volunteers. That's it.
So I certainly am not opposed to having, you said Dr. Mullins already has some stuff in process. I think there are some complications with regard to the same process being applied to volunteers, because there are some, I think there's some statutory limitations there, but I don't know that we necessarily need to get into the weeds on that right now. Perhaps have Dr. Mullins bring back recommendations for us on that process at a later time. Is that good for you, Mr. Susan?
Yeah, and the statutory limitations don't exist with us either, with us or the DOE on those topics. So I agree with you, and Dr. Mullins can work on that.
Just to clarify, I've already been in discussion with Mr. Gibbs and Dr. Thetty in reviewing both the legal and the procedural aspects and ensuring that standard operating procedure are guiding exactly what we need to do and how those align, keeping the legal impacts within our legal department and the HR responsibilities in the HR route. So we're analyzing and looking at that closely to update to make sure that we are being thorough and responsible.
Board members good with that? Having discussion? Okay. Does anybody else have anything we need to report or discuss before we call it a night? All right, there being no further business, this meeting is now adjourned. Have a great night. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs.